Are the Los Angeles Chargers in wide receiver or bust mode for the 2024 NFL Draft? We talk about that and so much more coming up next year on this episode of Locked On NFL.
You are Locked On NFL, your daily NFL podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of the Locked On NFL podcast, your daily NFL podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Oestreicher. I'm the host of Locked On Ravens and one of the many NFL experts here on our network, the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for tuning in today, making Locked On NFL your first listen each and every day, free and available as always, all podcasting platforms. That includes in video form on YouTube, where you can like this video and subscribe to the channel. Also in audio form, anywhere you get your podcasts, so Apple Podcasts, Spotify, the whole 9 yards. 5 days per week of NFL content for you, Monday through Friday. Today's episode of Locked On NFL is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more right now. New customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150, win or lose. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. We are back 10 days before the start of the 2024 NFL Draft. Kind of crazy. It has really snuck up on everybody, it feels like. And we have a lot to dive into here today. In the first part of the show, we'll be talking with Daniel Wade of Locked On Chargers, just talking about if it is wide receiver or bust time for the Chargers, considering that they now have no Keenan Allen and no Mike Williams. Then in the second part of the show, we didn't get to talk to him last week, but John Hickman of Locked On Texans joins us to talk about the Stefon Diggs trade aftermath. And then, as I always do, I do this every single year here, at least every year I've done this show. I like to take a segment out of the second to last week of the draft or right around the draft time to talk about NFL drafts, just from a whole perspective. So I'll be taking you through that in the final part of the show. Next week, obviously, we're going to try to get a lot of the teams with the top picks on the show. So be sure to stay tuned for that next Monday. And without any further ado, let's first get into our conversation with Daniel Wade of Locked On Chargers. The Los Angeles Chargers gearing up for what hopefully will be a successful NFL draft under new head coach Jim Harbaugh. Here to talk about that with me is of Locked On Chargers, Daniel Wade. And Daniel, I just feel like there's so much conversation about Jim Harbaugh and the new coaching staff and how excited people are in Los Angeles to finally have one of the big timer head coaches where they go out and they spend the money to get a guy like Jim Harbaugh. And the roster has been coming together over the course of these first couple of months of free agency. But obviously, there have been some changes to that roster, especially older players moving on. Keenan Allen getting traded to the Bears, Mike Williams getting cut, moving on to the Jets. They were able to retain some of their old talent, such as Joey Bosa, Khalil Mack, but it's going to be kind of a new era with the Chargers. And now they have a really high draft pick. They have the opportunity. After trading away all these wide receivers, you look at their wide receiver room now, it's a lot of inexperience, I would say. Not a ton in there right now, but you have guys at the top of this draft like Malik Neighbors and Marvin Harrison Jr., Romo Dunze, who could step up. Is this essentially wide receiver or bust for the Chargers in this draft at their pick? And would you be disappointed if they didn't take one of those wide receivers?
For me, it's unequivocally wide receiver or bust, to the point where it would have to be such a haul, to get back to move away off of that spot. You just don't get the stars aligning the way that they do for the Chargers this year very often, where you get rid of your two best receivers, you trade Keenan Allen, who's a Chargers lifer, but you have kind of a way to mitigate that loss by taking one of the guys that's part of, one of the more kind of historic hype-wise wide receiver trios that we've seen in a long time between Rome Odunze, Malik Neighbors, and Marvin Harrison Jr. Obviously, feels like the Cardinals will take Marvin Harrison Jr. if they stay there. Even then, though, Malik Neighbors is a hell of a consolation prize. I don't know how you could be upset with that, and I think a good fit for what the Chargers want to do. I think him and Rome Odunze would both be great, but to me, I think they have to come away with one of those blue chip wide receivers, and there's been so much kind of hype about Jim Harbaugh installing this new nose to the grindstone, blue collar, physical type of team where a lot of people think they're going to take an offensive lineman potentially there, but I think it would be a mistake. If you have the wide receiver room that you have right now with Quentin Johnston and Joshua Palmer leading the way, and oh, by the way, Joshua Palmer is a free agent after this upcoming season. So you're going into 2025 right now. Your main two guys are Quentin Johnston, who had a bust of a rookie season, right? And we'll see what happens this year. And Darius Davis, who's a return man, right? So like with all those things coming together, you have a chance to take a generational type of wide receiver prospect. I think they have to do it.
And they're actually kind of think about it a little bit, and there are some similarities between the Chargers position this year and their position last year, where Jackson Smith-Njigba goes off the board as the first wide receiver taken, and then the Chargers have their pick of the rest. They go Quentin Johnston. But if what you said kind of unfolds and the Cardinals take Marvin Harrison Jr., well, that's one receiver off the board, and the Chargers will have their pick of the rest of the litter. But you mentioned MHJ, Neighbors, Odunze. Which one do you personally, if you had to rank those three, how would you kind of go about it for the Chargers based off of fit and obviously talent?
I would do it exactly like that. I mean, for me, it's Marvin Harrison Jr. I don't think you overthink it. If he's there, maybe there's draft fatigue or prospect fatigue, something like that happening with him. I still think he's the best overall receiver. And if you're the Chargers, who don't really need one specific skill set, you just need to add as much juice as you can, as much talent as you can, and you can't really afford to miss on it. I think he's the most can't miss prospect out of those three, so I would still put him one. I still think Neighbors is close for me, though, just as someone who's watched the Chargers and have wanted some juice, wanted some speed to pair with Justin Herbert, to get someone like that. That's an obvious field stretcher, a guy that you think would pair well in a Greg Roman offense where it's like, hey, you step up on that play action, that safety takes a step forward, and you're toast. He kind of fits that, and a lot of the same reasons why we wanted the Chargers to take Zay Flowers last year, right? Give them some juice, give some, ability to have someone create with the ball in their hands instead of having Justin Herbert having to do it all by himself with his arm, because whoever's catching it isn't going to get much after that, right? Zay Flowers did exactly what he did in Baltimore, which just leaves the Chargers where it's like, what could have been. And you have Quentin Johnston obviously having the disappointing season that he has, but Rome Odunze, I think he gets lost in the wash a little bit just because he's stuck with those two really, really great players at the top. But if the Chargers wanted to find a way to, trade back a little bit, but not too far to where they still have a chance for someone like a Rome Odunze, I would still be happy with that. But I think to miss out on that trio, because I do think that all three of them could be, number one receivers in different draft classes too. I just think it would suck so bad for the Chargers, even though you do have enough roster holes, right, to justify trading back. If you miss out on those top receivers, if you're with Jim Harbaugh and don't expect to be drafting this high very often, obviously, it's going to feel like a missed opportunity.
And that's exactly it, where I don't think anybody's expecting the Chargers to be in this position again next year where they're picking as high as they are. So you got to take advantage of it when you can. And this is a year for them to take advantage of it. But speaking of Jim Harbaugh, obviously there is the Michigan connection. There's been a lot made about, well, how many Michigan players is Jim Harbaugh going to take when it comes to this draft? Because there are a lot of them, first of all. They're the national champions, and obviously Harbaugh knows a thing or two about these guys. So obviously J.J. McCarthy's going to the Chargers. Goodbye, Justin. I'm kidding about that, but seriously.
You'd be surprised how often I see that.
I'm sure it's all over the place. But you guys like Blake Corum obviously feel like a natural fit with Gus Edwards being there, but then not a ton else. Yeah. How many Michigan guys do you expect Jim Harbaugh to take? Do you expect it to be, you may see a guy every other round, or is it kind of overblown at this point?
It's probably a little overblown. I think the hard thing is there's so many Michigan players that are coming out in this draft class that would fit such obvious needs for the Chargers. So I would put the over-under at 1.5. It feels like they have to take one, right? But I was telling you before the show, I went back and looked, and in his time with the 49ers, after being the Stanford head coach with Andrew Luck, they never drafted a Stanford Cardinal in the 4 years that he was there. It was a different GM with Trent Baalke. Joe Ortiz from the Ravens is obviously someone that he kind of handpicked to come along with him to Los Angeles. So I think there's a big difference there as far as the control that he has now. At the same time, you look at, Mikey Samerstill, the cornerback from Michigan, would fit great with what the Chargers want to do with Jesse Minter, his former defensive coordinator, Junior Colson, the linebacker, Chris Jenkins Jr., right? He's another guy, would fit well. They don't have a lot in their defensive tackle room right now. So there's going to be too many good Michigan players for them to get a lot of them, because a lot of them are going to go on day 2 and you just only have so many picks, right? But if you're putting the one, the over-under, FanDuel wants to put it out there, 1.5, it'd be hard for me to go under and feel good about it. So even though I do think, they never end up taking as many as you think they will, this kind of an unprecedented situation with Jim Harbaugh being the national championship winning coach coming to the NFL and also having the type of control that he has inside of this organization right now.
Daniel's great, and for more on his work, check him out over at the Locked On Chargers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Coming up in the second part of the show, John Hickman of Locked On Texans will join us to talk about Stefon Diggs and more. Stay tuned, lots to get to on Locked On NFL. First, this show is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors is everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level up peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 120 million parts, your number one ride or die. You'll always find exactly what you're looking for, and with the eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Visit eBay Motors, your burden rubber, not cash. So the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Otherwise, all the exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. We are back, our second segment of Locked On NFL. Kevin Oestreicher still rocking out with you here on this Monday. Really appreciate everybody for being here once again. To the everydayers, thank you for listening to Locked On NFL each and every day. If it's first time in, thanks for tuning in. Hopefully you're enjoying the content and you want to stick around for a while, hopefully. And if you're somewhere in the middle, thank you again for tuning in. Let's talk with John Hickman of Locked On Texans. The Bills and Texans make a huge trade last week for Stefon Diggs. The Texans, they're putting together a heck of a team over there. Let's talk with John about it now. The Houston Texans got their guy last week in Stefon Diggs, trading a 2025 second-round pick via the Vikings to the Bills. Here to talk about that with me and more is John Hickman, one of the hosts over at Locked On Texans. And John, a lot of people were really impressed with Houston last year. I don't think many expected them to go as far as they did in the divisional round, and CJ Stroud was looking good his rookie season. Now, what do you do after that? You build around your quarterback on a rookie contract. Yeah. Out goes John Grenard, in comes Danielle Hunter. But the big move that everybody's talking about is the Diggs move. How excited were you that the Texans were able to go out there and add to their already really good receiving core and get CJ Stroud a proven veteran weapon?
Extremely excited. I thought that was a perfect piece to the puzzle for this offseason. You saw a week or two before that, Houston attempted to trade for Keenan Allen. The Chargers were like, you know what? We're not going to send him to an AFC competitor. We're going to send him to the NFC. So that fell through. And behind the scenes, we know personally with the Locked On Texas podcast, Cody and myself, that Houston was doing everything that they could to get Keenan Allen. Honestly, maybe a bit of an overpay if they would have, pulled the trigger on that trade for Keenan Allen. You look at Stefon Diggs coming over, 2025 second rounder, not really too much of an investment. They did void the last 3 years of his contract, so you can look at this as a 1-year proven deal. I believe we'll see Houston get a deal worked out with both Nico Collins and Stefon Diggs, maybe around when you look at Danielle Hunter, 2-year deal, right? Nothing major, gives them an opportunity to have an out right before CJ Stroud's contract. But when I look at bringing over Stefon, immediately I think Houston has 2 number 1 wide receivers. Immediately, this puts me up in the mindset of what the Cincinnati Bengals were able to do for Joe Burrow, right? Chase, what's my man's name? Chase, not Chase Young. Jamar Chase, excuse me, I apologize. T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd. They had an explosive wide receiver core. Now you look at Houston, Nico, who had a career year last year, finally with a proven quarterback in CJ Stroud. We know how great of a threat that Tank Dell was for Houston as a rookie last year, right? There were moments throughout their stretch of winning games where there was a conversation around who's the better receiver for real. Is it Nico? Is it Tank? You add Stefon to that mix. Also, you brought back Dalton Schultz, who was very good for Houston last year. And then you got some young bucks, and everybody wants to see John Mechie. So you look at what Diggs can be for this receiving core. He's the piece to knock this team from maybe a top 15 wide receiver core to now you look at him being top 6 or 7 in the NFL. I think he's that impactful as a receiver. And if they're looking at a top 6 or 7 wide receiving core, you have to wonder what does that do for CJ Stroud going into his second year. And we've seen Stefon be amazing for quarterbacks that are just now getting their feet wet in the NFL. So the Diggs trade, I think Nick Caserio finally, after years of trying to get in the right, he started last year. This is the piece where now you look around and you think to yourself, damn, can Houston really be contenders? I think they are.
Yeah, I think they are too. And I think when you talk about also the compensation, John, Houston did not have to part with a first-round pick for Stefon Diggs. It was that 2025 second. How ecstatic were you about the compensation where it's a second-round pick's not nothing, but obviously to get a player like Stefon Diggs, Houston essentially is signaling that, yeah, we're going to surround our quarterback with as much talent as we can.
I'm excited about it, man. Like we've seen in the past where Houston may have overtraded, right? Or they may have traded a player and didn't get a lot in return, or maybe traded for a player and had to give up way too much. I think this is perfect. Not only do I think it's perfect for both teams, but I think this is a win for Houston. They still have a second rounder for next year. Depending on how Minnesota plays out, not Minnesota, excuse me. Minnesota, they traded for 23. So I don't think they're going to be a great team. That'll probably be one of the highest second round draft picks, granted. But for Houston, we get an opportunity to get a game changer who's coming in and help open and expand our championship window. That second rounder, in my eyes, doesn't matter. So I think it's perfect compensation. And I also think that second rounder for Houston and getting Stefon, that just puts the league on notice that we got a shot. We're going to take it.
And that's exactly what you should be doing with a rookie quarterback. Or rookie contract quarterback, excuse me, where a lot of teams, they sometimes dilly-dally around it, but Houston is going not essentially all in because I think they have a much bigger future than just this season. But of course, you're now getting the veterans around the young talent. But John, with the AFC South and with the championship window that Houston is currently entering, obviously this is the team that won the AFC South last season. They're going for back-to-back. Now everybody's talking about the moves that Jacksonville made. They brought in a lot of new players. Obviously Anthony Richardson coming back for the Colts, and in Tennessee, they've made some big moves too. But to me, you look at what Houston did, and I think they have solidified their grip on the favorites in the AFC South. But of course, I want to ask you your opinion on that.
Well, we are in a what type of league? A quarterback type of league. We are in a passing league. And the landscape right now for the AFC South quarterbacks, CJ, Trevor Lawrence, the upside for Anthony Richardson, what you've been able to see from Will Levis. And I like what Tennessee has been able to do this offseason. Ridley, Hopkins still has Burks. I think that they gave their young quarterback the weapons that he needs to take those shots downfield. I like what they've been able to do. I'm not necessarily worried about them losing Derrick Henry because I think that they're going to shift that offense to a new age offense. But honestly, I think Houston not only has the quarterback, I think Houston has the play caller. I think Houston has the personnel. I think Houston will have the defense. And I think Houston has the head coach to return as the AFC South champions for 2 years in a row. I could be wrong, but I also stated last year that I think Houston had a shot to win the AFC South. A lot of people laughed at me. I think Houston's biggest competition going into this season will be the Tennessee Titans. I could be wrong with that. Sunshine might bounce back and surprise a lot of us, but they got to get weapons around them. And losing Ridley after 1 year, it's just disappointing. But I don't see any team in this division that's going to knock Houston out. They have CJ, and I believe a lot in that young man.
Right. And he proved it, and he's earned the trust of a lot of people. And now with the personnel, I think is going to be scary hours in Houston for sure, John. But let's round this out with a little bit of draft talk. Obviously, Houston's already been moving up and down the draft board and trading picks. Obviously, it's one of the reasons why they were able to get Stefon Diggs in the building, giving up a pick this year. What other needs do you feel like Houston has this offseason, John? And where would you expect them to go with their first couple picks?
This is a what league? Quarterback league, passing league. And I believe Houston needs to do what they can to combat that. And when you look at Houston being the number 25, 26 or something, bottom of the league passing defense, I think Houston needs to either at 42 address the best corner available, draft the best corner available, or draft the best safety available. And not only any type of safety, I think Houston needs to really bring in a very good single high safety that has shown that in cover 3, you can trust him on the back end of a defense. Houston already has Jalen Petrie. I think he's better when he's around the line of scrimmage. So personally, I think that they should go DB with the number 42 overall pick. Honestly, I think 42 and 56 should both be DB, and 86 should probably be linebacker. But safety, cornerback, linebacker within those first 3 picks, I would really like for Houston.
John giving us that great Texans insight. And for more on John, check him out over at the Locked On Texans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Coming up in the final part of the show, I will take you through some general NFL draft talk, talking about the quarterbacks at the top of the class, what other players could maybe surprise with their draft position, what teams could try to make moves, and a lot more. We'll get to that all next on Locked On NFL. First, this show is brought to you by Monopoly Go. Now, I've been told I'm a competitive person, and it is true, 100%. I definitely do have a competitive side. We all do. And my competitive side is a big fan of Monopoly Go. I'm sure you heard of it. It's been downloaded over 150 million times. It's a great twist on Monopoly, where you play on not one, but hundreds of Monopoly boards in crazy locations, building up amazing cities that bring you big money. But the best part for me personally is messing with my friends. For me, I charge them rent on my iconic properties, just like the classic Monopoly. But now you can also take a lot of what's in their vaults and those riches for myself. I love that. And plus, the leaderboards show me who's the biggest Monopoly tycoon is. But it's not just my competitive side that loves it. You can team up with friends and people all around the world in timed tournaments to earn huge rewards. So get in the game and join your friends. Download Monopoly Go now, free on the App Store or Google Play. And the show is brought to you by FanDuel. It's playoff time in the NBA and NHL. Baseball's in full swing, and FanDuel is your place to bet on every game. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150 win or lose. Bet on everything from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks, all in an app that's safe, secure, and easy to use. What are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to make your first bet an automatic win. For me, I'm a big Denver Nuggets guy, so hopefully the Nuggets have a lot of automatic wins in the playoffs. So be sure to visit FanDuel for all of the NBA playoff action. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. We're back, our final segment of Locked On NFL. Kevin Oestreicher still talking with you here on this Monday. And again, be sure to subscribe to us, audio form, video form, the whole 9 yards. Really appreciate the support on the show and on the channel. I'm going to be taking you through some general NFL draft talk. Obviously, the big story is the quarterback situation. It feels like it's been the big story for months now. Caleb Williams, the Bears making the decision to trade Justin Fields and essentially go all in on Caleb Williams. No one is necessarily shocked by that. We had plenty of conversations on this show with Lauren Cox of Locked On Bears, but I think it was the right move. Essentially a reset of the quarterback position. Caleb is one heck of a talented player. Obviously still some question marks, but the ability is there. And you add Keenan Allen to that roster. Obviously DJ Moore is there from the trade last year. You already have set up Caleb Williams with the pass catching room. I think that's the way to go, and there's no doubt about it. But then you start to get into the Commanders, the Patriots. What are they going to do? Because obviously both of those teams need a quarterback. The Commanders trading Sam Howell to the Seahawks. Feels like Jaden Daniels is the pick there. I mean, it just feels like there's been so much smoke. And I like Jaden Daniels a lot. I think that would be the right pick for the Commanders. The Patriots, that would probably leave them with Drake May. And I feel like, to me, that is, I'm not saying it's all the way. Like, Caleb Williams is set in stone, right? But there's a shot that, maybe the Commanders surprise some people and they take a Drake May. And maybe they like JJ McCarthy enough to go take him at 2. But it just feels like Jaden Daniels and Drake May. That's how it's going to play out. But then you look at 4, and that's the Cardinals. And obviously Daniel and I talked about for the Chargers segment of the show how, all right, well, if the Cardinals stay there, take Marvin Harrison Jr., that's an option. But would the Cardinals maybe trade back? Teams that are looking for a quarterback. Obviously, I think the Vikings are the team that everybody has circled there right after, I think the Raiders were a team a lot of people had circled as well, but the rumors and reports are they might not necessarily be targeting a quarterback, which again, I don't know. There are a bunch of smoke and mirrors at this point in the draft process. Like, you can't necessarily trust everything you hear. Teams are very close to the vest with how they play things, but Minnesota, it feels like, has been very obvious and is a very obvious landing spot if they want to go up and get a JJ McCarthy. Now, if Arizona stays put at 4, it's obviously the Chargers at 5, but then there's been some reports about, is Jim Harbaugh going to help out the Vikings, who passed on him last coaching cycle? And the Chargers, we talked about it with Daniel. It's like, okay, well, they need a wide receiver. So is it 6? Is it 7? Like, where does JJ McCarthy land? It feels like the Vikings are going to trade up for a quarterback. Obviously, then there are the other quarterbacks throughout this draft. It feels like Michael Penix and his stock has risen towards maybe the end of the first round. Bo Nix obviously is a player to watch. So the quarterback situation is the big talk of this draft, and rightfully so, because there are multiple franchise players in this class. I think Caleb Williams is a franchise player. I think Jaden Daniels is a franchise player. I think Drake May and JJ McCarthy have that potential. Sure, so do Bo Nix and Michael Penix. But it's going to be interesting because I think we could really, there are the top 4 guys, but I think we could see 6 quarterbacks taken in the first round, especially if a team wants to trade up back into the first round, a la, I'm the Locked On Ravens guy, how the Ravens did for Lamar Jackson in 2018. They traded with the Eagles for the 32nd pick, got the 5th-year option, traded essentially 2 seconds for it, and they made that happen. So I wouldn't be shocked there. Wide receiver, we did talk a lot about it with Daniel in the Chargers part of the show, but Marvin Harrison Jr. is a can't-miss prospect. Obviously, Malik Neighbors, Romo Dunze are also there. But then you have kind of the end of the first round guys where there is a drop-off, but you look at like A.D. Mitchell and Keon Coleman and Xavier Legette and Xavier Worthy, right? Those players, they're going to be good. Like, there are still going to be good wide receivers throughout this class. But the big one is the offensive line as well, where this is a deep offensive line class. I expect guys like, Taliz Fuaga, Troy Fautanu, Joe Alt, obviously, Fashanu. Like, there are going to be probably 4 stud tackles taken in the top 15, top 18. Like, and then you still have players like Amarius Mims and Tyler Guyton, Jordan Morgan. Like, you still have those types of guys. There are 7 or 8, depending on how you look at the board, 7 or 8 first-round tackle prospects in general. Now, you could also talk about, where's Jackson Powers Johnson going to go? Is that somebody who could sneak his way into the first round just because, look, he is really good? That's another area where offensive line is such a premium position. We saw Robert Hunt get 5 for 100 from Carolina. Damian Lewis got, 4 for 53, 4 for 54 from Carolina as well. Offensive line is such a premium position, and it's valuable, with those positions, wide receiver, offensive line, corner, edge, to have those players on rookie deals for as long as you can, because once they enter that second contract stage, it does take a lot more, and it just is a lot more expensive to re-sign those guys. So I think that's another area. The corner class, Terrion Arnold, Kenyon Mitchell, like those guys, Kool-Aid McKinstry, but there aren't going to be a ton of corners taken in the first round. Safety, not so much. Edge guys, obviously Dallas Turner is kind of the top guy. Chop Robbins has been a riser there. But I think this draft class, first round wise, is going to be dominated by offensive linemen, by wide receivers. And I think also, to me, I think quarterback is the obvious one, but there are a lot of quality players in this class. So I'm excited to see how it all pans out. Of course, we're going to be covering it here on Locked On NFL. That's all I have for you today on Locked On NFL. Thank you so much for tuning in to the show. Coming up tomorrow, more NFL content with the Tuesday host. So be sure to stay tuned. We'll see you right back here tomorrow on Locked On NFL.